Unspoken Spice-Shelf Rules. Every 1950s mother knew that made plain food taste good before every dinner needed a packet. Strongest. The shelf above her stove knew dinner before the recipe did. In 1956, in a small American kitchen with a stove pushed against the wall, Jean could open one narrow cabinet and smell the whole week. Onion fat, still warm from supper. Black pepper in a metal tin. Paprika with a dusty red rim. A bay leaf that had been sitting there long enough to feel like furniture. A little bottle of cider vinegar waiting beside the salt cellar. There was no wall of bottled sauces. No subscription meal kit in a cardboard box. No packet promising bold flavor in 12 minutes. There was a shelf, a spoon, a pan, and a woman who had cooked the same groceries enough times to know when plain food needed salt, when it needed acid, when it needed fat, and when it simply needed 5 more minutes. The past was not easier. Women carried too much unpaid work, too much expectation, and too little praise for the intelligence inside those routines. But some of those routines were clear. And the spice shelf was one of them. Because the mystery is not whether old food was fancy. It usually was not. The mystery is how a few small tins did the work of an entire modern flavor aisle. These are 11 unspoken spice shelf rules every 1950s mother knew. They helped make plain food taste finished before every dinner needed a packet, a bottled sauce, a frozen tray, or a branded flavor system. Most of these rules cost little. Some were backed by chemistry. Some came from repetition. And many disappeared when modern life found something easier to package, refill, and sell. For number 11, subscribe. This is exactly what this channel is here to remember. Not fantasy, not perfection, but the practical knowledge modern life quietly priced up. Number 11, the smell before you use it rule. She opened the tin before she opened the recipe. Jean did not trust a spice because the label said paprika. She trusted it because it still smelled like paprika. She would lift the little metal lid, give the tin one small shake, and bring it near her nose before it ever reached the pot. That was not quaint. It was quality control. By the 1950s, American kitchens already knew brands like McCormick, whose spice history reached back to 1889, and Schilling, whose tins sat in cabinets across the country. But even a good tin could lose its voice. Dried herbs and ground spices do not usually become dangerous overnight, but their flavor fades as volatile aroma compounds disappear. Whole spices often hold flavor longer than ground ones because less surface area is exposed to air. So Jean had a rule. If the color looked tired and the smell was weak, that spice went into the background, not the finish. A dull bay leaf could still sit in soup. A fresher pepper could still wake the plate at the end. Today, many kitchens have oversized jars, decorative spice racks, novelty blends, and even auto-refill pantry subscriptions. The shelf looks fuller, but fuller does not mean more useful. A giant jar that sits for 3 years is not abundance. It is storage pretending to be flavor. Jean's old shelf began with judgment. The modern shelf often begins with inventory. The first test was not the label. It was the smell. Number 10, the 1 meat, 3 dinners rule. The leftover roast did not come back as the same meal. On Sunday, it sat on the table with potatoes and pan gravy. On Monday, it became hash with onions, pepper, and a little paprika. By Tuesday, the last pieces might disappear into soup with bay leaf, celery salt, and whatever vegetables were left in the icebox. This was not just thrift. It was transformation. Mid-century cookbooks treated leftovers as normal kitchen work, not failure. Better homes and gardens had been part of American cookbook culture since 1930, and books like that taught a kind of domestic engineering. Stretch, reseason, reshape, serve again without making the family feel punished. The mechanism was simple but powerful. Aroma changes identity before ingredients do. Onion, pepper, vinegar, gravy, and herbs could make the same base food feel like a different meal because the nose reaches the appetite before the fork does. Modern convenience often solves that problem by selling novelty. A frozen meal. A delivery order. A meal kit. A new flavor pouch. The U.S. meal kit delivery market was estimated at over $12 billion in 2024. Built partly on the promise that dinner can feel new without the cook having to decide how. Jean's spice shelf did the same emotional job with fewer objects. It gave leftovers a new direction. She did not hide leftovers. She gave them a second name. Number 9. The small tin rule. The spice shelf was small because flavor had an expiration of usefulness. Jean did not need 40 jars to prove she cooked. She needed the ones she actually reached for: black pepper, paprika, mustard powder, bay leaf, cinnamon, celery salt, maybe garlic powder, maybe poultry seasoning. A few tins close enough to use, but not so close that steam from the stove softened the labels and ruined the contents. That mattered. Heat, light, air, and moisture all work against dried spices. They fade aroma, dull color, and turn a once useful jar into kitchen decoration. A small tin used regularly could be better than a large jar saved for someday. Old Bay, born in 1939, became famous in a tin for a reason. The container itself belonged to an older world of compact, practical seasoning. Mid-century spice cabinets were not always elegant. Sometimes they were crowded, greasy, and plain. But the best ones had limits. Modern food culture often goes the other way. Bulk jars, pantry aesthetic racks, limited edition blends, rubs for every meat, seasonings for every trend, and jars bought because the kitchen looks more complete with them lined up in rows. The U.S. seasonings and spices market is estimated in the billions because flavor is no longer just a cooking decision. It is a shopping category. Jean's small shelf rewarded use. The modern shelf often rewards buying. A full spice rack can still be a dead spice rack. And that is the first pattern. The old shelf was not impressive because it was large. It was useful because it forced decisions. Smell it. Use it. Keep it dry. Finish what you own. Change the meal with timing, not clutter. The modern aisle did not appear because the old habit failed. It appeared because the old habit could not be sold twice as easily. A mother with 5 active tins, a vinegar bottle, and a pan of onions was harder to market to than a shopper who believed every dinner needed its own packet. Number 8. The bloom it in fat rule. The secret was not the paprika. It was when the paprika hit the pan. Jean knew that a spice dropped into a cold, watery pot could taste flat. But a pinch of paprika, pepper, or garlic powder warmed briefly in fat could make the whole kitchen change. First came the onion. Then the spoon scraped the pan. Then the spice touched the hot fat, and suddenly the meal smelled like it had more in it than it did. This was kitchen chemistry before anyone in the house called it chemistry. Many flavor compounds are carried better by fat than by water. When ground spices warm briefly in oil, butter, or pan drippings, their aromas spread more evenly through the dish. The flavor feels bigger because the fat carries it across more bites. Mid-century women did this with bacon drippings, roast fat, butter, margarine, or whatever the budget allowed. A little paprika in fat before potatoes. Pepper and drippings before gravy. Poultry seasoning warmed before the leftover chicken became soup. Today, the same need is often packaged as bottled simmer sauce, powdered skillet mix, pre-seasoned frozen meals, or just add protein packets. The modern version can be useful. Convenience has its place, but it often sells more product where the old method used better timing. Jean was not adding more flavor because she had more money. She was making small flavor travel farther. The product changed. The pan chemistry did not. Number 7 is where salt stops being simple. Number 7. The salt separate from flavor rule. She knew salt was not the same thing as seasoning. On Jean's counter, salt had its place, but it did not run the whole meal. The salt cellar was one tool. Pepper was another. Onion, vinegar, bay leaf, mustard, paprika, celery salt, and pan fat each did a different job. That distinction mattered because salt can make food taste more alive, but aroma gives food its identity. Much of what people call flavor comes through smell. A pot can be salty and still taste flat. A sauce can be low on imagination long before it is low on sodium. Branded seasoning blends were not new. Lowry's restaurant history goes back to 1938, and Old Bay began in 1939. Those blends became beloved because they were useful. But in the home kitchen, Jean still knew the difference between using a blend and surrendering the whole meal to one. Modern flavor packets often collapse every decision into one envelope. Salt, sugar, starch, spice, color, and identity already chosen. Ranch powder says what the potatoes are. Taco seasoning says what the meat is. A rub names the chicken before the cook has tasted it. The old method gave the cook more control. Build aroma first. Taste. Then salt. That did not make dinner glamorous. It made it adjustable. Salt was a tool, not a personality. Number 6. The vinegar at the end rule. 1 spoon of sharpness could wake up a dull pot. Jean kept vinegar near the spice shelf because she knew some foods did not need more salt, more fat, or more cooking. They needed brightness. A spoon of cider vinegar in beans. A little pickle brine in greens. A splash at the end of hash, gravy, or cabbage when the whole pot tasted heavy and tired. It was not a sauce collection. It was correction. Vinegar had been a basic American pantry staple long before the 1950s kitchen, and women's cookbooks often treated acids, pickles, mustard, and relishes as ordinary tools for balancing rich or plain food. The mechanism was simple. Acid changes perception. It can make heavy food taste lighter, make bland food taste more awake, and make the tongue notice contrast before the cook reaches for another handful of seasoning. Modern food companies understand that same need. They sell it back as bottled dressing, squeeze sauce, marinade, finishing sauce, glaze, dip, and condiment. In one modern market estimate, North American sauces, dressings, and condiments generated more than $46 billion in 2023. That does not mean every bottle is useless. Some are delicious. Some save time. But Jean's old rule came before the bottle wall. Taste the pot first. Add a small, sharp note. Decide again. The old solution was a spoonful. The modern solution became a shelf. The bottle was not a sauce collection. It was a correction tool. Number 5 is where the old routine starts looking sharper than the modern aisle. Number 5. The gravy before packet rule. The flavor was already in the pan. After meat came out, Jean did not wash away the brown bits. She looked at them. A spoon of fat. A spoon of flour. Water, milk, or broth. Pepper from the tin. Maybe a little onion. Then the spoon scraped the bottom until the pan gave back what dinner had left behind. Mid-century cookbooks and household manuals treated sauces and gravies as basic kitchen knowledge, not specialty cooking. The principle was practical. Browning creates deep, savory flavor. Starch thickens. Fat carries aroma. Liquid loosens the browned bits stuck to the pan. Together they turn scraps into sauce. Modern industry sells the same comfort in instant gravy packets, jarred gravy, bottled sauces, and frozen meals already covered in flavor. Those products can be convenient, especially when time is short. But the uncomfortable truth is that the old kitchen often used what the modern product teaches people to discard. The pan had flavor before the packet had instructions. This is where nostalgia becomes less soft. Jean was not doing a charming little ritual for decoration. She was using the last useful material in the skillet before spending money on another product. The modern aisle did not invent gravy. It made the shortcut visible, branded, repeatable, and refillable. A packet is easy. But so was paying attention. The flavor was already in the pan. The packet arrived later. By now, the pattern is hard to miss. The spice shelf did not work because it was magical. It worked because it kept control close to the cook. Smell before using. Keep the shelf small. Bloom flavor and fat. Separate salt from seasoning. Wake dull food with acid. Use the pan before opening a packet. Modern products began replacing not just ingredients, but judgment. Not all of them are bad. Convenience can be a mercy. But the business model grows fastest when the old pause disappears. Number 4. The house blend rule. Every house had a flavor, even if nobody named it. Jean might have kept a small reused jar with no proper label. A little pepper, paprika, garlic powder, parsley, celery salt, maybe mustard powder if the family liked it. It went on potatoes, eggs, meatloaf, soup, and casseroles. Nobody called it a signature blend. Nobody printed it on a pouch. But the family knew it. Commercial blends had already proven their power. Lawry's seasoned salt tradition traces back to its 1938 restaurant history, and Old Bay began in 1939 with its famous seafood seasoning profile. Those brands worked because they made flavor recognizable. But inside the home, many mothers did the same thing, quietly, with a smaller jar and no advertising department. The mechanism was not only culinary. It was behavioral. Repetition reduces decision fatigue. A reliable blend turns cheap food into something familiar and intentional. It gives a house a taste, the way curtains give a room a color. Modern stores now sell branded rubs for chicken, steak, fish, tacos, potatoes, popcorn, eggs, and almost every mood a dinner can have. The U.S. seasonings and spices market is estimated in the billions because flavor identity has become a product category. Jean's house blend did not need 20 names. It needed to work. She did not call it branding. She called it dinner. The final 3 are where flavor stops being a habit and becomes a product category. Number 3. The stretch the meat with flavor rule. Number 3 is where convenience starts to look more expensive than helpful. A small amount of ground beef did not always mean a small dinner. Jean could stretch it with onions, potatoes, rice, macaroni, beans, gravy, or tomato. Then the spice shelf did its quiet work. Pepper for warmth, paprika for color, bay leaf for depth, garlic powder if she had it, vinegar if the pot tasted flat. The goal was not pretending meat was endless. The goal was making scarcity taste planned. This is exactly the kind of household logic modern convenience later standardized. Hamburger Helper made its national debut in August 1971 with 5 flavors. General Mills has said that 27% of U.S. households bought it in its first year. That number matters because the box did not invent the need. Families were already stretching meat. The box made the method uniform, branded, and easy to repeat. The mechanism was simple. Starch creates volume, seasoning spreads identity, and sauce makes a small amount of protein feel connected to the whole plate. A skillet of meat, macaroni, onion, and seasoning feels like dinner because flavor travels through the dish. Modern boxed helpers, skillet kits, instant pasta meals, and meal stretchers can still be useful. But they also show the deeper shift. What used to be a flexible kitchen habit became a product with instructions, flavors, shelf space, and repeat purchases. The helper was new. The helping habit was not. Number 2. The no branded flavor night rule. Before taco night, ranch night, barbecue night, and garlic butter night became products, they were decisions. Jean could take the same chicken, the same potatoes, or the same leftover vegetables and point them in a different direction. Pepper and onion made one dinner. Vinegar and mustard made another. Paprika and pan gravy made another. A little tomato, a bay leaf, and garlic powder could make the pot feel entirely changed. The meal did not need a branded identity before it began. By 1954, Swanson's TV dinner had entered American food history, and convenience began changing not only how dinner was prepared, but how dinner was imagined. A tray could arrive already named, divided, and decided. Later came more frozen dinners, boxed meals, sauce systems, skillet kits, and meal kits. The modern product often tells the family what kind of dinner it is before the cook has smelled the pan. The mechanism is partly sensory and partly emotional. The same base food feels new when aroma, sauce, serving form, and expectation change. Jean knew that without calling it psychology. A chicken leg with pepper gravy did not feel like the same chicken leg served cold with mustard, pickles, and potatoes. Modern meal kits now sell that decision in cardboard. The theme, the sauce, the spice packet, the portion, the name. The U.S. meal kit delivery market was estimated at more than $12 billion in 2024. That is not just food. That is dinner identity turned into a recurring purchase. Jean's old kitchen chose the direction before a brand did. The old kitchen chose flavor. The modern package names it first. Number 1 is not another spice. It is the pause modern industry had to remove. Number 1. The taste before buying rule. Jean's strongest rule was almost invisible. She tasted. Not once at the table when it was too late. She tasted while dinner was still becoming dinner. She lifted the spoon, cooled it with a breath, tried the pot, waited, smelled again, and made one small correction. Salt if it was dull. Vinegar if it was heavy. Fat if it was thin. Heat if it was unfinished. Pepper if it needed warmth. Time if it simply had not come together yet. That was the real spice shelf. Not the tins. Not the labels. Not even the brands, though McCormick had been part of American spice history since 1889. Old Bay had been born in 1939, and Lowry's seasoned salt tradition reached back to 1938. Those are strong anchors. But Gene's power was not ownership. It was feedback. Old cookbooks often used phrases like season to taste and correct the seasoning, because the recipe could only take the cook so far. The final decision happened in the kitchen, with the actual pot, the actual appetite, the actual groceries, and the actual budget. That feedback loop was simple. Taste, wait, adjust, taste again. Modern industry often shortens that loop into a purchase. The sauce aisle says, buy brightness. The packet says, buy identity. The frozen tray says, buy completion. The delivery app says, skip the question. The auto refill pantry says, never run out, even if nobody has stopped to ask what the food needs. And the scale is enormous. Seasonings and spices alone are a multi-billion-dollar market. Sauces, dressings, and condiments are larger still. Meal kits add another multi-billion-dollar layer. The modern food system did not invent the human desire for flavor. It learned how to sell decisions that used to happen on a spoon. That is the uncomfortable truth inside Gene's little cabinet. The old habit delayed spending long enough for skill to solve the problem. It did not always work perfectly. Some dinners were plain. Some were overcooked. Some mothers were tired. But the principle was powerful because it kept authority in the room. Taste before replacing. Adjust before buying. Wait before surrendering dinner to a packet. The spice shelf was not the product. The pause was.